Hey Jack, I'm back, and with me, another speed art. This one is of the good guy doll in the first Child's Play and was much requested after I put out the evolution animation on the main channel, which somehow became the fastest video over there to reach 1 million views, so I think Chucky fever may be in full force with a new movie coming out soon. But I don't really judge my videos based on views, as I'm always trying to improve my animation and editing skills with each release, blah blah blah. But before the new film fractures the timeline, I want to give my ranking of the series, so with some light spoilers ahead probably, let's jump into the series and rank them from worst to first. So starting on the bottom of the list at number 7 is Seed of Chucky from 2004. This is the first film directed by Don Mancini, the creator and writer of the series, and his inexperience in the director's chair really shows here. Gone is the tension from earlier entries, and in its place we have forced humor, more akin to an SNL sketch than a Chucky film, and worse makeup and puppetry effects. And maybe that wouldn't bother me if the humor landed, but a lot of jokes are pretty crude and don't really incite laughter. But there are some good things to enjoy here. Mainly, Brad Dourif is back as the voice of Chucky, and Jennifer Tilly returns now in a dual role as both herself and Tiffany. And unfortunately, the lukewarm reviews and box office from this film doomed the Chucky franchise to slash budgets and straight to VOD releases from here on out, at least until the new film this year, that is. So moving on and landing at number 6 is Child's Play 3, the final in the original trilogy, which I dubbed the Andy trilogy because of its focus on Andy and Chucky's relationship for the most part. And while I don't hate this film, I think there's some interesting kills and a few good scares, it certainly comes across as pretty rushed and pretty unoriginal in its premise. Basically, it's Child's Play 2 with a new coat of paint and a time jump. And while it's not totally void of new ideas, the cadet setting allowed for some interesting sequences, and the final part of the huge pop-up carnival is a fitting climax for a titular antagonist. But it lacks both the puppetry and design work of part 1 and 2, and the weird haircut subplot is a little odd. And fun fact, the hairdresser is actually played by, I think, the husband from the first Hellraiser movie, which is a cool little connection. But all in all, this is the weakest of the first 3, although I don't think it's as bad as some people make it out to be. And coming in at number 5 is the latest film, Cult of Chucky. While I know some people love this entry, I do admit it is a lot of fun, but there's something that just doesn't quite add up for me. While I'm glad they retained some of the horror elements from Curse of Chucky, there is an overemphasis on jokes when the multiple Chuckies get together, which sort of deflates the final act. But there is some great stuff on display here, mainly Fiona Dourif, daughter of Brad Dourif, takes on the wheelchair-ridden Nika again, and the multiple Malcolm character and creepy doctor add in a spice of fun to their scenes, but it's unfortunate in my opinion that the more horror and mystery elements are put aside in the final act, although with all the craziness happening in the third act, I am interested in seeing where they plan on taking the TV series later this year or maybe early next year. So all in all, I think this one's pretty solid, but just not amazing. And taking the number 4 slot just above its sequel is Curse of Chucky. People assumed it was a reboot because of how it was marketed, but after sitting through the film you learn how it connects to the universe as a whole, and I think that really helps to add an additional intrigue to the movie, as it's largely a haunted house film where no one knows what's really going on until the final few scenes. Even the audience is somewhat left in the dark until the big reveal, and once that happens, that's when the fun begins with a lot of interesting and fun kills. This entry, like Seed and Cult, is also directed by Don Mancini, but it seems he has his most restraint here, allowing the atmosphere and tension to take the film, rather than the action of the jokes. So I'd say even if you're new to the series, this is probably a good one-off horror flick. And before jumping into the top 3, go ahead and leave your top 3 down below. I'd love to see what you think about the franchise before I sully you with my opinion. So with that said, my number 3 spot, we're going to lean back a little bit on the comedy angle, but with some horror still in play with Bride of Chucky. A lot of fans are split on if this film was good or bad for the franchise, but for what they were trying to achieve, I believe they accomplished it pretty nicely, blending horror and comedy smoothly while adding in a bit of tongue-in-cheek, self-referential humor akin to the Scream series to inject new blood into the franchise. Also, the addition of Tiffany helps to add more to Chucky's character and gives him an equal to play off of. While I'm a bigger fan of the more tension-driven or horror-driven angle, I can't deny that this film was able to breathe new life in the series after the relatively stale Child's Play 3. And for the top 2, I had a very hard time deciding which would be top dog and who would play second fiddle, because they're both pretty great, and when compared to the other entries, they come off looking, I'd say, almost near perfect. But for the number 2 spot, I'm gonna have to place the original Child's Play from 1988. This is a film that builds tension slowly over the course of the first 2 acts and gives us Jaws-like camera work where we see the view from the killer's perspective, while it helps to add an air of a whodunit to the narrative, and while we all know it's certainly the doll, it does add another layer to Andy's terror as he's not believed and even blamed for the crimes. And also, small tidbit, Andy's doctor, who gets fried by Chucky, is the same actor who played the reporter following the Hulk around in the original 1970s and 1980s series. So I thought that was a nice little connection between the two evolutions in a row on my main channel. But anyway, almost nothing can beat the original, but the next entry may just do that by a doll's hair. And rating in at number 1 is the first follow-up, Child's Play 2, retaining the horror from the first film, but amping everything up from the kills, to the jokes, to the suspense. Everything just adds up to an extremely strong film in the horror genre. The opening, which the next 2 entries would have their own versions of, sort of, where he's put back together in some way or another, is perfectly done here, setting up the horror with the strong music and allowing the series to continue with added rules to his resurrections. Now, there's something nearly unsettling about Chucky following Andy into the foster system, which is already a pretty crummy situation to be in, but add onto it that the killer doll is still chasing you, and the music here may be at its best, most notably during the classroom scene where the more playful elements of the score come out. And Kyle, Andy's foster sibling, is also a welcome addition to the franchise and ally of Andy. Unfortunately, she hasn't played a big part in the series since, but hopefully with the TV series, she'll have a bigger role to do. While I think Chucky looks creepier in the first film, I personally feel like the puppetry is at its most effective here, allowing a puppet Chucky to walk on screen for the first time and not be cut off at the waist, and that all adds up to this sense of cohesiveness that this film holds. So everything together, I feel like Child's Play 2 is the big honcho of the franchise for me. So what do you guys think of my list? Does it sound about right, or is there something amiss? And are you guys excited for the new film coming out in a few months? I'm pretty excited. I'm a little bit skeptical on if they'll be able to pull it off, and I'm a little bit upset that they're fracturing the timeline, because this is like the only horror franchise that I can think of that has kept the exact same timeline without reboots or just changing everything up every few years. So now I'd like to thank all my patrons on the main channel. I'd like to thank Anthony Stamps, Karen DeMarsh, Dead Meat, Colton Wood, Zoran Zukovic, Alex Holgan, HB, Q, Ross McIntyre, Anthony Denny, Maurice Surrey, Ethan Roshkem, Hendrick, Sam Marks Green, David Warshaw, Sam, Jeremiah Lambert, Paul Kasak, Emmanuel Obregan, and Minkus Baby. If I pronounce anyone's name wrong, I apologize. If you'd like to support the main channel and in turn this channel, there's a link in the description, and you can become a Tele-Animated hero as well. And until next time, I'm Aaron, and I'll tell you something later.